Oh, 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 welcome to La Révolution des Français. Oh, oh, oh. I tried. Liberté, égalité, fraternité, République française means liberty, equality, fraternity. Liberty, the freedom that the French people wanted. Égalité, equality that the estates and the people wanted in France. Equality. Fraternité, brotherhood. Not like join my fraternity, Sigma Delta Alpha Beta, whatever. It's about like being in a fraternity, brotherhood, brotherhood, brotherhood. We're going to answer these questions and then you're going to take a look at the revolution's essay. So here we go. Historically speaking, who has generally been the most important person in a nation's history? You guys were all freaking out that the answer was it wasn't in the document. I know, you had to think about it. If you think about it, the king, the leader of the Roman Republic, right? The royalty, the people with the most money, those are the most powerful people in history. It's just the way it is. Now, it's a little different because there are no like nations back then, right? King of the kingdoms and queen of the kingdoms, and then lords, nobles, and those people in the Middle Ages. Charlemagne, William the Conqueror, Julius Caesar of the Roman Empire. Those are kind of the most important people in history. King Tut when you guys were in sixth grade. But really, the Pope, the King, those are the people who were in charge back then. During the French Revolution, we are going to seize the French people. They are going to overthrow the government. No more king and queen. So, as you saw in the little brain pop, or not brain pop, the TED Ed video about the French Revolution, it talked a little bit about the history of the French Revolution. Now, the Bastille, we scroll back down, all right, the revolution starts when the Bastille was stormed. The Bastille was a prison, a French prison, where, and this is it, where a lot of debtors went. Now, a Bastille is a prison, and in prisons are generally guns, weapons, ammunition, stuff like that. So the three estates, the first estate, the king and the wealthiest and royalist of royalty. The second estate, which are kind of like the other rich people who work with the king and the royalty. And then the third estate, 98% of the population, the farmers, the peasants, the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie means the middle class. The 98% of the rest of France. They were the ones that stormed the Bastille. They're the ones that invade the prison and say, all right, let's get some guns, let's get some weapons, let's overthrow this prison, let's take over France. We're sick of the king, we're sick of the nobles, we're sick of the lords and ladies. Like, we're 98% of France, let's go, we want rights. So they're the ones who overthrow the Bastille. Again, if you look at this little class system, the first estate, which is the royalist of wealthiest, the clergy, the people in the church officials, and other appointed religious officials, them and the king, they make up 0.5% of the people. It's like nothing. And they have all the wealth. Them and the nobles, the military. So the top 2% in all of France at the time, they make up 98% of the wealth. And of course, the third estate, the poorest of poor, the merchants, the bankers, the social studies teachers, the farmers, the doctors, the lawyers, they're the ones who pay 100% of the taxes. Gee golly, do we think this is going to anger some of the people? Because imagine today if the bottom 25% of the nation were the only ones that pay taxes. It'd be horrible. So this Bastille is stormed because 90% of the population were poor, and they were the ones who paid all of the taxes. And again, the bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie, they are the middle class. At the top of the third estate are the middle class. So imagine the bottom 98% of France, but then the top of that bottom of France are the bourgeoisie. So the most middle upper class of the lowest class are the bourgeoisie. That's French for middle class. Merchants, bankers, farmers, doctors, lawyers, professors, social studies teachers. They make up 20% of the third estate. And then the rest, The other 80% are seventh graders, farmers, peasants, and seventh graders. Y'all are the bottom. Basically, France is poor. I don't know if you're aware of that. So things need to change. Oh, revolution. Oh. So that's what we got. Now, we have an estate system in France. We don't have an estate system in the United States, which is kind of funny because I said estate in the United States. If we go down here, all right, the estate system, really what the estate system is followed, okay? There were nobles and clergy. We had what's called an estates general. This was a meeting of the government. The estates were basically the three different groups of people socially and politically in France, economically too, against their will. They meet for the first time in like 100 years or something to say, okay, let's talk about what's going on in France. There's clearly some upheaval and frustration with the poorest of the poor. Magically, the poorest of the poor are always upset. I get it. So there's a meeting. Now, eventually, the third estate realizes, wait a minute, the first estate and the second estate, the wealthiest of wealthy, they vote against us. They're voting that things should stay the same, that the third estate should still pay all the taxes. They realize this is not what we want to do. And so they break off. So the third estate says, we're not going to do this because socially France is divided by economic status. Now, there was an event called the Enlightenment where this was a time of political change. Europe had pretty much always been ruled by kings and queens, and they were the ones who had power. The Enlightenment changed that. A new way of thinking took place. People looked at their social and their political place in the world, and they thought, wait a minute, the scientific revolution changed things. The church really isn't the most powerful thing in the country or in the world. Maybe we should have more rights. Maybe it shouldn't be just the kings and the queens and the knights and the nobles and the lords and the ladies. Maybe everyone has the same rights. Kind of novel. So this Enlightenment was a time period where people challenged the old way. They said, we as all humans have rights, and we should be able to work our way up or work our way down the social classes. It's coffee time. Hold on. So, that was a good cup of coffee. So really it was, okay, we need to change the way we think about things. Now, in 1788, France has a ridiculous food shortage. Food items and everything else are going through the roof. Meanwhile, King Louis XVI, this guy over here, literally is dressing like the richest of the rich and eating the wealthiest of the wealthy and doing whatever they want. And the price of food skyrockets. Oh, that's right. I forgot. The poorest of the poor paying all the taxes. So there's a meeting. So there's a National Assembly. There's a meeting. And on June 17th, 1789, the Third Estate said, you know what? We're not going to meet with this Estates General meeting anymore. They leave and they create what's called the National Assembly. They create their own government, National Assembly, an assembly of the national people of France. They worked on a new constitution, and they created a constitution where people had rights. I'm going to bold this. Gives more rights. On June 20th, 1789, they meet at a tennis court. Yes, a tennis court. And they write this new kind of government. It's called the Tennis Court Oath. This is the Tennis Court Oath. There were indoor tennis courts back then. I don't know anything more about tennis than that, okay? But they write a new government. And this new government says, we are going to take a new step. They wanted to overthrow the French government. They wanted to create what was called a Declaration of Human Rights. They wanted to have rights for all people. If you really think about this historically, this was a big deal. Like, there were no human rights laws in Rome. There were no human rights laws in Charlemagne's empire. There were no human rights laws in the Renaissance. I mean, the only time there were like human rights laws was during ancient Rome, like Roman fall and like ancient Greece. But these rights weren't really rights of people. They were sort of, you're in this political and social and economic state, and so you kind of follow these rights and principles. But now Everyone should have the same rights. It sounds like I have a cool idea. And then in 1791, just 2 years after the Bastille was stormed, by the way, the Tour de France, Bastille Day, is July 14th, 1789. It's kind of like France's Independence Day. A constitutional monarchy is formed. Now, think about the terms here. Constitutional. A constitution is a law book or a rule book. Monarchy, that means it's ruled by a king. France is going to do the following. We're going to have an elected assembly, meaning we're going to vote for people to represent us, and the king would oversee it. But the king wouldn't have as much power as the king had before, because now we have elected representatives that are working with the king. And I'm totally sure King Louis XVI was all about that. Like, wait, I've been king my whole life, and now I have to work with people? Oh, yeah, no, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I definitely want to work with people. No, the king wants to do whatever the king wants to do. So there you go. And that's that. Now, if we go back up, right? King Louis in 1793, him and his wife realized things are getting really bad. And in 1793, they try to escape. It doesn't go really well because there's a group called the Jacobins. Now, the Jacobins were an extreme group who said, you know what? Let's do what we want. Let's seize power. Let's physically take over the government. And let's physically get rid of the people that oppose us. Basically, they wanted to cut people's heads off if they disagreed with them. I'm actually for this today. I was thinking about a new discipline policy. Never mind. Okay, the Jacobins. Finally, the Jacobins, they don't mess around. And they're like not messing around in a real way. The Jacobins round up hundreds of government officials, and they literally capture King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, his wife, and they try them for crimes, and they literally cut their heads off. It's kind of cool. I'm going to zoom in real quick. They literally behead the king like, ow, my head hurts. I have a headache. It's because you don't have a head. So they literally cut off the heads of the leaders in this revolution. So the king, think about it, they literally decapitate the government. So now that the king is dead, France goes into a massive revolution. There's this thing called a Committee of Public Safety, which is run by Maximilien Robespierre. He wears sunglasses at night. He basically said, we need to make sure that the public is safe. And we need to make sure that the people overthrow the government, but they don't go too crazy, which is ironic because he was the leader of the crazy part. So he was a lawyer who tried to make things kind of like normal, but that didn't happen. So people are rounded up by the hundreds. Eventually, 40,000 people are killed in this reign of terror. Definitely watch this video because it is amazing. So when you're done watching this, click on this video about the Reign of Terror and watch it. It is awesome. It is terrible. Get it? Don't worry, they cut Robespierre's head off eventually because they realized that things weren't working out. So the Reign of Terror, they're trying to kill all of these people who basically say, we don't like the way the government works. Now, let's think about this, okay? How do these events be revolutionary? Well, let's go down here and take a look at some things, okay? Robespierre's executed. Government leaders elect the Directory. They create a new council that's going to handle food shortages, the rising prices of goods. They're going to create a banking system. They try to prevent other countries from invading France. What they're actually doing is they're trying to create a government. Now, if we're to go down and think about the revolution and think about it in terms of how historically it was a big deal. Sorry, I didn't mean to scroll that far. Let's take a look at the following. How was this event revolutionary? Well, a revolution is an overthrow of government. So if you think about it, when the French civilians storm the Bastille, they are taking power into their own hands. They are physically overthrowing the Bastille. They are physically overthrowing a government-run business, institution, building. Then they physically overthrow the First and Second Estate. They have a government meeting, the Estates General. And at this Estates General, what happens is the Third Estate overthrows the government. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette are beheaded, literally overthrowing physically the French government. When King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette die, they literally are the end of the French monarchy. All royalty and kings and queens, all that stuff ends with their beheading. So the French people physically rose against the government and physically overthrew the government by cutting off the heads of the kings and queens, by physically enforcing this reign of terror, by killing government officials. So France's government is overthrown as the people physically take over and create their own government. They create a national assembly. They create a constitutional monarchy. They create the Directory. This is how the French Revolution becomes revolutionary, by creating a government. It doesn't help, though, that Napoleon Bonaparte takes over, because Napoleon Bonaparte pretty much ends the French Revolution, because Napoleon just takes over everything. I don't know why I clicked on dictionary, sorry. So that's what we got. The results of the French Revolution: feudalism in Europe pretty much dies, or at least in France. So there's no more feudalism. So there's no more king, no more queen. All of a sudden, France creates its own kind of country-ish, with the idea of liberty, equality, fraternity, brotherhood, and then a declaration of rights of man, that people actually have human rights. So this is kind of how it works. So when you're thinking about how were the events in France revolutionary, you have the overthrow of a government body, meaning the king and queen. You have the overthrow and physical taking of the Bastille, a French government-owned prison. You have the creation of a new government, the Directory. You have a tennis court oath where they meet in the Estates General, and the Third Estate physically overthrows the government and writes a new constitution. That is the French Revolution. That's what makes it revolutionary. It's cool. So I'm going to stop us there, because that is the French Revolution in a nutshell. Again, if you haven't watched this film in terms of the French Revolution, this needs to be watched, the TED video. You need to watch this video, because it talks all about how the French government, rights of people, and where do they come from, and how the government was overthrown. So please watch that if you have not done so already. All right? And don't forget to watch the Reign of Terror video, because it's terrifyingly good. So watch this too. All right, there you go, French Revolution. Oh.